I've come this evening to talk with you one of the greatest issues of our time. That is, the preservation of human freedom. I have chosen to discuss it here in France because here in the soil, the roots of human freedom have long ago struck deep here and they've been richly nourished. It was here the Declaration of Rights of Man was proclaimed, and the great slogans of the French Revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity, fired the imagination of men. I have chosen to discuss this in Europe because this has been the scene of the greatest historic battles between freedom and tyranny. I have chosen to discuss it in the early days of the General Assembly because the issue of human liberty is decisive for the settlement of outstanding political differences and for the future of the United Nations. In the preamble of the Charter, the keynote is set when it declares, "We, the people of the United Nations, determined to reaffirm faith in fundamental rights, in the dignity and worth of human person, and in the equal rights of men and women, and rights of nations large and small, and to promote social progress and better standards of life and larger freedom." This reflects the basic premise of the Charter that the peace and security of mankind are dependent on mutual respect for the rights and freedoms of all. One of the purposes of the United Nations is declared in Article 1 to be to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems of economic, social, cultural, or humanitarian character, and in promoting, encouraging respect for human rights for the fundamental freedoms for all without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion. We must not be confused about what freedom is. Basic human rights are simply easily understood. Freedom of speech and freedom of press, freedom of religion and worship, freedom of assembly, and the right of petition. The right of men to be secure in their homes and free from unreasonable siege and seizure and from arbitrary arrest and punishment. The basic problem confronting the world today, as I said in the beginning, is the preservation of human freedom for the individual and consequently for the society of which he is part of. We are fighting this battle again today as it was fought at the time of the French Revolution and at the time of the American Revolution. The issue of human liberty is as decisive now as it was then. I want to give you my conception of what it is in my country by freedom of individual. Naturally, there must always be consideration of rights of others, but in a democracy, this is not a restriction. Indeed, our democracies, we make our freedoms secure because each of us is expected to respect the rights of others, and we are free to make our own laws. Freedom for our people is not only a right, but also a tool. Freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of information, freedom of assembly. These are not just abstract ideals to us. They are tools with which we create a way of life in which we can enjoy freedom. Basic decisions of our society are made through the express will of the people. That is why when we see these liberties threatened, instead of falling apart, our nations become unified and our democracies come together as a unified group in spite of our varied backgrounds and many racial streams. It is my belief, and I am sure it is also yours, that the struggle for democracy and freedom is a critical struggle, for their preservation is essential to the great objective of the United Nations to maintain international peace and security. The place to discuss the issue of human rights is the Forum of the United Nations. The United Nations has been set up as a common meeting ground for nations, where we consider together our mutual problems and take advantage of our differences in experience. It is inherent in our firm attachment to democracy and freedom that we stand always ready to use the fundamental of democratic procedures of honest discussion and negotiation. It's now, as always, our hope that, despite the wide differences in approach we face in the world today, we can, with mutual good faith in the principles of the United Nations Charter, arrive at a common basis of understanding. Who are here to join the meetings of this great international assembly, which meets in your beautiful capital of Paris. Freedom for the individual as an inseparable part of the cherished traditions of France. As one of the delegates from the United States, I pray Almighty God that we may win altogether another victory for the rights and freedoms of all men.